Imagine for a second that you're looking at a clock. You're just watching the second hand sweep across the dial.
Right, just ticking away with absolute predictable rhythm.
Exactly. It's the steady heartbeat of reality.
Hmm.
But then, without any warning, that second hand just starts racing.
Oh, like it spins so fast the hours literally blur into minutes.
Yeah, the days blur into seconds, and an entire lifetime flashes by before you can even catch your breath. Now, your immediate reaction would probably be, well, the clock is broken, right?
Right, because that is the comforting conclusion. I mean, if the clock is broken, then the rules of reality are still completely intact. The mechanism just failed.
Yeah, just a mechanical glitch.
Exactly. But it is entirely terrifying to consider the alternative, which is that the clock is working perfectly fine, and it's the actual fabric of time and space itself that has suddenly warped around you.
And that tension, that specific unnerving moment when you realize the rules you thought governed the universe might actually be completely flexible. That is exactly what we are exploring today.
We're doing a deep dive into a profoundly mystical essay by the author Sui Feng.
Yeah, the piece is titled, let me get this exactly right. It's The 36-8 Trigrams Formation, Which Are Hard to Conquer. And it's part of his larger Apocalypse series.
It's a fascinating read, and what makes this text so remarkable for you, the listener, is how the author constructs this massive paradigm-shifting argument. He uses three completely distinct, seemingly unrelated experiences from his own life and family history.
Right, we're talking about a bizarre botanical phenomenon high up in the mountains, plus a cryptic ancient Taoist manuscript bet on a whim at a noodle shop.
And a grandmother's surreal folktale about a door in an empty field.
Which is so weird because on the surface, botany, a random old book, and a myth have absolutely nothing in common. But our goal today is to look past the surface. Okay, let's unpack this. We are going to practice seeing the hidden frameworks around us.
Right, diving into the theory that we are all currently living inside an invisible grand matrix designed by what the author calls the greatest creator.
It's a massive concept. But to understand how he gets to that conclusion, we have to start exactly where he did, right?
We do. We have to examine the very first crack in his perception of normal reality. And this doesn't happen in some dusty library or, a quiet meditation retreat.
No, it happens in an extreme, physically demanding environment.
Exactly. So the year is 1983. It's the height of summer, and the author is working in the Kulian Mountains. And for context, he is way up there.
Like an altitude of nearly 4,000 meters.
Yeah, almost 13,000 feet. At that height, the environment is just harsh and unforgiving. He describes the landscape as this desolate, yellowish earth. It feels entirely dormant.
Just totally lifeless. So he goes to sleep in his tent, surrounded by this yellow, barren expanse. But when he wakes up the next morning and steps outside, the world is completely changed.
Literally overnight, the entire landscape has donned this vibrant green attire.
Which is wild.
Right. The author bends down to inspect it and finds that the grass, which looked completely dead and dried out just the day before, has actually grown more than 5 millimeters in a matter of hours.
It's almost like the biology of the mountain was responding to a hidden signal, just collectively breaking through its physical constraints all at once.
And the bizarre part is it doesn't stop. The acceleration just continues.
Right, it goes into overdrive.
Yeah.
A few days after this sudden greening, wildflowers spontaneously erupt across the entire mountain range.
And a few days after that, those flowers bear fruit. Give it another few days, and those fruits are completely ripe and ready to drop.
And then comes the final jarring twist. Just a few days after that harvest, the lush green landscape completely dies back. It reverts to the exact same desolate, yellowish earth he saw on his very first day.
The entire life cycle of this ecosystem, from birth to growth to reproduction to complete death, took less than a single month.
Which is absolutely staggering, because down on the plains, that exact same biological process for those exact same types of plants takes half a year.
Yes, 6 months compared to less than 1.
It's as if someone hit the fast-forward button on a remote control while you're watching a time-lapse video. The mountain is operating on an entirely different temporal frequency.
Exactly. And this is where the author begins to pivot from just a casual observer to a philosopher.
Right, because a purely scientific mind might just log the phenomena.
Yeah, they might say, well, the altitude, the intense ultraviolet light, the specific atmospheric pressure, they create a microclimate that forces rapid germination.
Which might be entirely true from a biological standpoint. But the author begins to view this not just as a biological quirk, but as a localized bending of reality.
He's asking a much deeper question here. Why does the exact same seed know it has 6 months to live at sea level, but it knows it only has 30 days at 4,000 meters?
He writes this beautiful, almost haunting question for the reader. He asks, is this hyperspeed life cycle a kind of sorrow or a kind of happiness? Is it a hymn or a lament?
What's fascinating here is how that question highlights his shifting mindset. The rules of time in biological development, which we normally assume are universal constants, they're actually highly malleable depending on the specific zone you are standing in.
So this extreme natural event acts as the first real fracture in his rigid modern worldview. It primes him to look for alternative explanations for how the universe operates.
Because if the fundamental timeline of a living organism isn't fixed, what else isn't fixed?
Exactly. If the physical rules of nature can bend, you naturally have to start wondering if human events are bending too.
Are the things we think of as random chance actually governed by their own invisible, hyper-localized rules?
And that philosophical itch takes us a few years forward to 1986.
Right, the author is traveling in Hainan. He visits Tianya Haizhou in Sanya, which is a place whose name translates to the ends of the earth.
Which is a very fitting location for someone who's already questioning the very boundaries of the reality he occupies.
It really is. So after his sightseeing, he heads back to the city of Haiku, ducks into a small, unassuming restaurant, and eats a bowl of stir-fried noodles.
As you do.
Right. But right after finishing his meal and walking out the door, he spots an old man sitting under a tree, selling a pale yellow, ancient-looking book.
The title is The Art of Becoming Invisible, Taoist Magic, or the original Chinese title is Qi Men Dun Jia.
Now, for those who might not know, the Qi Men Dun Jia is an incredibly profound, historically dense text.
Yeah, it's not light reading.
Not at all. When the author flips through it, he is hit with a wall of complex, esoteric terms. Heavenly stems, earthly branches, the 5 elements. To him, in that moment, it is completely incomprehensible.
But he buys it anyway.
Yeah.
Driven by that specific, undeniable curiosity that makes people buy things they don't understand just to possess the mystery.
We've all been there.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And like so many books we buy with good intentions, it just sits on his shelf, an unread artifact gathering dust.
Until he takes a trip back to his hometown and has a fateful conversation with his younger brother.
Right. The brother brings up a terrible tragedy that recently struck a family in their village. And as an offhand remark, the brother mentions that this devastating calamity happened on the exact same day the family had hosted a massive, joyous celebration.
And the brother even tells the author the specific calendar date.
Now, the author is deeply unsettled by this juxtaposition, you know. Extreme joy colliding with extreme tragedy on the exact same day.
So he goes home, takes that pale yellow book off the shelf, and looks up that specific date in the Qi Men Dun Jia. And there it is, recorded in black and white. That specific day is mathematically marked in the text as highly ominous, a day of disaster.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you here. I have to push back on this on behalf of you, the listener, because my immediate skeptical reaction to this is textbook confirmation bias.
I completely understand why you'd say that.
I mean, it's a massive statistical coincidence. Isn't it just human nature to look for patterns in the noise after a tragedy occurs? We are terrified of random chaos, so we look at an old book, we find a vague connection, and suddenly we think we have decoded the universe. How does the author just blindly accept this as a magical rule?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is exactly the right question to ask. And if the author had stopped there, you would be entirely correct. It would just be a psychological crutch.
Right.
But the author doesn't just blindly accept it as magic, he reverse engineers it. This incident pushes him to actually study the book. And what he discovers is that the Qi Men Dun Jia isn't just a farmer's almanac for picking a lucky day for a wedding. It is an incredibly intricate system of algebraic formulas.
Wait, what do you mean by algebraic formulas? We were talking about ancient Taoist poetry, right?
Not at all. Think of terms like the 5 elements or the heavenly stems and earthly branches, not as mystical poetry, but as variables in a complex equation of space and time.
Variable.
Yeah. In this system, the earthly branches represent specific coordinates in time, and the 5 elements represent specific outputs of energy.
Oh, I see.
So if fire represents an explosive, expanding energy, and water represents a suppressive, extinguishing energy, the book is basically a calculus text. It's for calculating the exact moment and location those two energies will violently collide. It is an astronomical matrix.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's less about a psychic predicting a bad day and more like a meteorologist predicting a hurricane based on atmospheric pressure data.
Exactly. And the author realizes that the legendary, almost supernatural wisdom of ancient Chinese sages, historical titans like Jiangxia, Zai Liang, and Zhuge Liang was entirely derived from mastering this specific mathematical matrix.
Oh, wow, that completely reframes historical lore.
Take Zhuge Liang, for example. He's famous for borrowing the eastern wind to win a massive naval battle. For centuries, people thought he was a literal wizard.
But the author is saying he wasn't using magic at all.
Right. Through the Qi Men Dunjia, he realizes Zhuge Liang had just mastered the underlying mathematical algorithm of the environment. He calculated the exact coordinate in space and time where that wind had to occur.
If it's a predictive mathematical mechanism, then it's not retroactive confirmation bias. These ancient figures weren't just brilliant generals making lucky guesses. They were operators reading the source code of reality.
Precisely. It shifts the entire narrative. Just as the grass in the Kilian Mountains operated on a hidden, highly compressed code of biological time, human events operate on a strict code of timing, placement, and energy.
So the author realizes that what we call fate or tragedy isn't random chaos. It is a scheduled event within a much larger programmed system.
Which is a terrifying but incredibly profound thought.
Totally. So let's track the logic here. If the biological clocks of plants can be manipulated, and if the seemingly random timeline of human events is actually a mathematically predictable code, what about physical space? Is the actual solid geometry of the world we walk through just as programmable?
To answer that, the author turns away from his own experiences and relies on a story passed down by his grandmother. And this is where the text requires us to really stretch our conception of physics.
The grandmother's story sounds like a fairy tale at first, but it actually functions like a high-level science fiction concept.
Yeah, tell them about the door.
She tells him about a peculiar man in the distant past who goes out into a completely flat, empty field. There are no buildings, no walls, nothing. And this man builds a freestanding door out of stone.
Just a door frame standing by itself.
Exactly. You can walk around to the front of it, you can walk around to the back of it, and all you see through the frame is the empty field. But the peculiar man tells the villagers, this is a celestial gate. If you walk through it, you cannot come back.
Naturally, the villagers laugh at him. They think he has completely lost his mind. But there is a cocky young man who decides to call his bluff. He wants to prove the old man wrong.
Because there's always one guy who has to prove everyone wrong.
Always. So he struts up to this freestanding stone frame and steps over the threshold. And instantly, he vanishes from the field.
He doesn't just walk to the other side of the door. He is somewhere else entirely.
Yeah, the text paints this incredibly vivid sensory picture of the realm he enters.
He steps through and is suddenly standing among towering ancient trees and verdant rolling hills. There are distant mountain peaks shrouded in thick mist, white cranes soaring through the sky, and cascading waterfalls. It is a pristine, immortal paradise.
He wanders down a path and approaches a beautiful house. A woman dressed in vibrant, colorful clothes comes out to greet him and simply says, "I have been waiting for you for many days."
Wow.
Inside, a kind, middle-aged woman sitting in a high-backed chair explains to him that they have a destined bond that has spanned multiple lifetimes.
And the young man stays. He marries the beautiful woman that very day. They build a life together. They have exactly 5 sons and 5 daughters.
He lives a completely full, joyful, uninterrupted life. He eventually passes away peacefully as an immortal at the ripe old age of 99.
He experiences an entire century of existence.
But we have to look at what is happening outside that door, back in the empty, flat field. The onlookers watch this young man step through the frame and simply dissolve into thin air.
They must have been freaking out.
They run around the door, searching the grass, looking behind the stone pillars, but he is completely gone. Panicked, they turn to the peculiar man and demand he bring the boy back.
And the peculiar man stays entirely calm and tells him to wait for 6 hours. But less than an hour later, the young man suddenly materializes on the ground, completely unconscious.
And the moment he appears, both the peculiar man and the freestanding stone door vanish forever, leaving absolutely no trace that they were ever there.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about the mechanics, what just happened. If you were trying to explain this to someone today, you might use the analogy of putting on a VR headset or stepping into an augmented reality portal, right?
Yes. But a much better way to understand this, from a Taoist perspective, is to think of a terrarium.
A terrarium, like a glass box for plants and reptiles.
Exactly. If you build a terrarium and put a heat lamp over it, you create a self-contained ecosystem. The humidity, the temperature, the day and night cycle inside that glass box operate on a completely different climatic reality than the living room the box is sitting in.
Okay, I follow you.
The stone door operates exactly like the glass wall of a terrarium. It is the boundary line of a localized pocket of reality. Inside that pocket, the physics and the flow of time are completely insulated from the outside world.
Oh, that makes perfect sense. The time dilation is the crucial clue here. Inside the terrarium, the young man experiences 99 years of a rich, full life. But outside the terrarium, in the empty field, less than a single hour has passed.
Exactly.
The spatial portal isn't just moving him to a different place, it is inserting him into a completely different operating system of time.
And this brings us to the critical philosophical clash between the grandmother and the author. After telling this incredible story, the grandmother looks at him and says, "Silly boy, if you contemplate the mysteries of the heavens and earth, profound truths may one day become clear to you. Do you want to become that young man?"
And the author, who is young, ambitious, and deeply steeped in a modern standardized education, just completely dismisses her.
He says, "Grandmother, you're talking about mythology. We are now studying science, and mythological stories are just made up by people."
He rejects the concept of the portal entirely because it doesn't fit into his textbook definition of how molecules and gravity are supposed to behave.
And the grandmother's response is the absolute crux of this entire deep dive. She doesn't argue with him. She simply says, "I don't understand science. Let everything be determined by fate."
Wow.
This exchange represents the ultimate collision of two paradigms. On one side, you have rigid scientific materialism, which demands everything be measurable, repeatable, and logical. On the other side, you have an openness to cosmic, unquantifiable mysteries.
The grandmother understands intuitively what the author is only just beginning to piece together. She realizes that science, as we currently understand it, might just be the study of the rules inside our specific terrarium.
Yes.
But fate, or what we call magic, represents the rules operating outside of it, or the rules used by whoever built the terrarium in the first place.
Exactly. So let's look at the board. We have all these seemingly disparate pieces. We have the hyper-accelerated biology of the Chilean mountain grass. We have the predictive mathematical algebra of the pale yellow Chimendungia book.
And we have the grandmother's story of a freestanding door that houses a 99-year terrarium of time.
Right. How does the author finally synthesize these three threads into a unified theory of reality?
The grand synthesis happens much later in his life, and it is catalyzed by reading yet another piece of literature called The Story of the Magic Mirror.
Right. In this story, he reads about a character named the White Flower Fairy who descends to the mortal world. But specifically, he pays attention to the magical formations she encounters.
Things called the U-Water Formation, the Fireless Formation, and the Band Knife Formation.
Now, to a casual reader, those just sound like cool fantasy novel obstacles. But to the author, who has been quietly processing the math of the Taoist book and the physics of his grandmother's story, it triggers a massive cascading epiphany.
He realizes that these formations aren't just magic spells. They are logic gates. They are system firewalls.
Yeah.
Break that down for us. What exactly is a formation in this context?
A formation is essentially a constructed pocket of reality. It is a programmed matrix with its own specific, inescapable rules of time, space, and consequence.
So it's not a spell.
No. If you step into a fireless formation, it doesn't mean someone cast a spell to put out your torch. It means you have crossed the boundary into a localized pocket of reality where the chemical reaction required to produce fire simply has not been coded into the environment.
That's incredible. The rules of physics have been rewritten for that specific area.
And that is the moment the puzzle pieces violently snap together for him. He realizes that the Taoist book, the Chimendungia, isn't just about reading dates on a calendar to avoid a bad day. It is a literal instruction manual for identifying, creating, and breaking these programmed formations.
Yes. The math of the heavenly stems and earthly branches is the underlying code of the formations.
The grass in the mountains acting weird, that wasn't just weather, that was the biological rule set of a localized formation that the author accidentally slept inside.
And the stone door in the field, that was the physical boundary line of a highly advanced spatial and temporal formation.
Exactly.
So who is building these terrariums? Who is programming the formations? The author points directly to the architect of the universe, what he calls the greatest creator.
He postulates that the greatest creator has laid out 36 8-diagram arrays like 36 master formations across the cosmos.
So what does this all mean?
Well, here is the ultimate paradigm-shattering twist that the author arrives at, the realization that changes how we view everything. We are not just wandering around observing these formations from the outside.
No.
We, humanity, are currently living inside one of them.
That is heavy. The entirety of human history, all of our scientific laws are perceived steady passage of time. It is all just the internal logic of one of the greatest creators' 36 terrariums.
This raises an important question. To illustrate the gravity of this, the author uses a brilliant analogy that you'll appreciate if you know classic Chinese martial arts lore.
Oh, yeah.
He compares our situation to the legend of Shi-Sun and the dragon-slaying saber.
Oh, this is a great comparison. For those who aren't familiar, in the legendary stories, the dragon-slaying saber is the ultimate weapon. Warriors and martial artists spend their entire lives fighting, bleeding, and dying just to possess this sword, believing that whoever holds it rules the world.
But Shi-Sun, the Golden Lion King, eventually realizes the ultimate secret. The power isn't the sword itself.
Right. He realizes that the true secret is a sacred text, a martial arts manual and military strategy guide that was physically forged and hidden inside the metal blade of the sword. The only way to access the true power was to actually break the indestructible weapon.
And the author is saying we are doing the exact same thing as those foolish warriors. We spend our whole lives fighting over the surface level rules of science.
Yeah, we argue about politics, we fight over territory, we study the physics of the blade.
But we are completely missing the source code that was forged into the universe itself. We are trapped inside the blade.
And that raises the most important question of the entire text, doesn't it? If we are trapped inside a coded array, who among us can decipher the greatest creator's formation?
Exactly. Who has the clarity to see the matrix for what it is, find the hidden text, and actually break the formation?
Right.
The author concludes that it all comes down to destiny. It depends on our individual and collective zawa, which basically means our fate, our cosmic luck, our spiritual readiness to perceive the truth hidden beneath the mundane world.
What an incredible intellectual journey. I mean, we started at the freezing 4,000-meter physical altitude of the Kilian Mountains, looking at some fast-growing grass, and we climbed all the way to the philosophical heights of universal, matrix-like formations in hidden source codes.
It forces a total reevaluation of how you move through your own life.
It really does. And I want you listening right now to really try and conceptualize this today. Look around you. Imagine that your commute, your memories, the very laws of physics that keep your feet planted on the ground are just a pre-designed array.
Start looking for those invisible frameworks.
Exactly. Pay attention to the strange coincidences, the shifting perceptions of time, the moments that don't quite fit the logical narrative of your day, because those glitches might just be the seams of the formation you are unconsciously walking through.
And I will leave you with a final lingering thought to mull over as you go about your day. We know that time operates entirely differently inside a formation. Remember the young man in the grandmother's story? His entire century of life was just a single hour to the people standing outside the door. So if humanity is indeed living inside one of the greatest creator's 36 formations, what will our perception of time and reality look like the very second we finally decode the matrix, break the formation, and step outside?
It would be like realizing the clock was never actually broken. You were just trying to read the time while standing completely trapped inside the gears. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden architecture of reality. Keep questioning the world around you, and we will see you next time.